How many of you in here, let's be honest, come on, we got to be honest, this is church. If you lie in church, God will kill you. And so how many of you have read at least portions of the book of James in the last 3 weeks? Would you raise your hand? Come on now, I'm proud of you. And if you love the Word, would you praise His holy name? Come on, you love the Word. And we're in this series. This series has been good, but it's been a challenge for me because it really needed 5 weeks. And for some reason, I decided to do it in 3 weeks, and not the smartest thing that I've ever done. And so just to review, the book of James. There were 2 disciples who followed after Jesus named James. But who wrote the book of James? Well, it was neither one of them. It was actually the half-brother of Jesus. So to review some things that we've talked about to get on the same page, the half-brother of Jesus, he thought Jesus was crazy. You can see in the gospel one time, they wanted, with some other people, they wanted Jesus institutionalized. Because they thought, hey, he's claiming that he's God. He's got to be crazy. Interesting enough, this all changed in James's mind. Well, when did it change? It changed when Jesus rose from the dead. Because when your brother, who says that he's God, dies and 3 days later, walks into the house with you and has Cocoa Krispies with you for breakfast, that is a game changer, isn't that right? Well, we know that it changed the way that he lived because one day he was actually martyred because he refused to deny that Jesus rose from the dead. This guy was a pastor in Jerusalem, a real pastor. So when you read the book of James, when you look at the word, I think it's important you understand this is coming from a heart of a pastor. What is the heart of a pastor like? If a pastor has 99 people who are doing well and one who is broken down, they're thinking about the one. That's a pastor. James was a pastor in Jerusalem, so respected. The first time Paul, after the road to Damascus, after the conversion, when he went to Jerusalem, the first thing Paul wanted to do was to meet with James. The last time Paul went to Jerusalem, he wanted to meet with James. Peter wanted to meet with James when he went to Jerusalem. So at this time, after Stephen was persecuted and then martyred, the church scattered. James remained right there in Jerusalem, and he wrote this letter. It's called an epistle. An epistle is not the wife of an apostle. It literally means a letter, so it's not really even a book. It's a letter. And he wrote this challenging the people. So for the first week, we hit chapter 1 and chapter 2, and we really hit hard on trials. Like when you're going through a trial, because some of you are in a trial right now, some of you just came out of one, and some you're about to go through one. Is there any way to count it all joy, like to consider it joy, like the scorecard equals joy? Is there any way to have that? James was writing that to people that he loved because he could see that the church was discouraged. And a lot of times we romanticize the early church, but they had problems. They were gossiping, and they had issues. Their motives were off track. Some of them were cheating, and some of them were lying, and there were issues. So last weekend, we hit chapter 3. Chapter 3 is mostly about words. And we hit the power of words. There's a slogan that we say, you've heard it many times, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is bunk. That is not Bible. Words matter. And if you think of times where you were most discouraged, it was probably a word shared to you. But it's also important you understand, some people need to hear a sermon because words have hurt them, and it might have even been your words. Raise your hand if you've ever said something that you regret. Like last week, I regret the way that I slammed the baseball team of the Razorbacks. And let me review in case you weren't here. I said, some of you have heard these phrases like, you're fired, and it hurt. Some of you have heard the phrase, I no longer love you, and it hurt. Some of you are a baseball fan of the Razorbacks, and the words, I've got it, and it hurt. Okay, I said that last week, and but I don't think I should go there again. And then this week, I want to talk to you about drifting. Now here's the truth. Some of you are drifting right now. It might be a slow and quiet drift. Like, have you ever been to the ocean and you're playing out of the waters for a long time. When I was a kid, I would go out there and just stay out there all day. After a few hours of that, you look back to the shore to see your mom under the umbrella, and she's not there. But she didn't move, you moved. And it's like I didn't even know that I was drifting. And it was the shore that showed you that you drifted. This is what the Word does. It shows you, like you were here, but you moved. Like, why did you move? But some of you, you actually are drifting at a much higher rate of speed. It's more like a riptide. This last week, a 19-year-old kid was in Georgia, and a riptide hit him and sent him 3 miles down the coastline. Somehow went through the whole night and lived through it. So I don't know if you are slowly drifting, if you're being ripped away, or if you are slipping away. But you can see, and this was a challenge. When I saw chapter 4 and 5, I thought, how can we put it all together? And it hit me. It's a lot about the drift. So one of the ways I believe that James is trying to cry out to us about drifting is he's saying, this is the first point, tension is building in our relationship. This is when you know you're drifting. Tension is building in our relationship. This is the way he said it. I'm going to speak the most about this, and I'm going to rush. I want to apologize that I'm going to have to fly through a lot of this material, so it's going to be hard. You're going to have to listen fast. But this is what he says. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Let's all say this out loud. What causes fights and quarrels among you? One more time. What causes fights and quarrels among you? A good question, but he's going to give the answer. In fact, he answers this question. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Is there any tension sometimes in your home? What causes those fights and quarrels? Do you ever hear people argue and fuss? And have you ever seen family members that love each other yelling at each other across the room or on a phone or even through a text? Have you ever seen churches split? Have you ever witnessed road rage? Have you ever caused road rage? Where's racism coming from? What causes fights and quarrels among you? Friday night, this weekend is my wife's birthday. She doesn't like attention, so let's all give my wife a hand. It's her birthday. She's amazing. On Friday night, we were having a party with the family, and I was the one that wanted to go and get the pizza, because if you go and get the pizza, you can eat a little bit on the way back. And so anyway, I had to go into Zaza's. How many know that God made that place, all right? And so I went to get the Zaza's pizza. And when I walked in, there was this family sitting outside. It's hot out there, but they were sitting out there, and they were having so much fun. I was thinking about, man, it's way too hot. But when I walked by, they were having so much fun. I was thinking, man, I wish I could sit down with them and just get to know them. But then I went in and I went to get the pizza, and they said, sorry, we're running a little late. It's going to take about 10 minutes. Do you mind waiting? I said, no, I don't mind. So I sat down and I waited 10 minutes, got the pizza and walked back out. The same family was sitting there. But now they were arguing with one another. One of them said, Tommy, you ruin everything. And he goes, no, everybody at this table knows you would ruin everything. So before I wanted to sit down and have fun with them, now I just want to sit down and watch. But as I continued to walk, I was thinking, what causes fights and quarrels among us? I speak monthly to people who are in our church sometimes. And through the conversation, they'll say, I haven't spoken to my dad in 10 years. I haven't had a conversation with my mom in a decade. My brother and sister, we don't talk ever. What causes fights and quarrels among us? Have you ever seen a Christian write something on social media that was attacking people? What causes fights and quarrels among us? Years ago, there was a spoof, like a skit, Saturday Night Live perhaps, and it was a psychiatrist who had someone coming in for counseling, and he would only counsel people for 3 minutes. And so she shared her heart and what was wrong. And he said, look, I'm going to give you 2 words. This is only going to take about 3 minutes. I'm going to give you 2 words. Don't forget them, just remember them. So she's saying all this problem. He just looks at her, stop it. And she's like, there's a lot more to it than what... She goes, you don't understand. When I was raised, he goes, no. We're not going there. Don't you want to be held? Stop it. And she goes, gosh, there's a lot more to it. No. Stop it. I wish I could just look at the church and tell you, stop. Like, here's the problems. Stop it. But it doesn't work. I tried it with my kids. You ever tried that with your kids? I've been to some of your homes, having dinner with you and loving it. Then the phone rings. Dad, when my kids were little. Dad, Hunter's beating us up. He stole our candy. Dad is terrible. Come home. Put Hunter on the phone right now. Hunter would get on the phone. Hunter, stop it. But did it work? No chance. The phone rang again in 10 more minutes. If it would work, then I would just yell at you, stop it. There was a pastor that we had on staff for the first few years, and he would literally get into fights with people in our church, not arguing. He would hit them. So I would just want, well, did you win the fight? He didn't even win the fights. So I told him, stop it. But then he would do it again. I've had churches pick me up at the airport. I get to consult churches often, and when I get there, it's not uncommon for, as soon as the executive pastor picks me up, for them to slam the church. Like, you're going to be meeting with our church today, and I just want to let you know, our pastor, you're going to hate him. I had that happen one time. It's like, stop it. Oftentimes, I'll have an issue with someone in church. I thought of some tension. One time, there was a 20-year-old young man who got a 17-year-old girl pregnant, and they told me about this in my living room with my wife. And so then I'm thinking, oh no, we've got to tell this girl's dad, and he's a black belt in karate. And so I was thinking, this could go south fast. So everybody's at our home, and I coached this young man on exactly what to say. But he didn't. He sat down, we sat down, and this was an overconfident young man. And he looked at the dad of this girl and said, I love your daughter. She's pregnant, but everything's going to be all right because I'm her man. And I'm like, stop it. Stop it. And I saw this guy just cracking his knuckles. And he goes, I told you not to date my daughter. He goes, oh, you don't have to worry about it. I already got it figured out. We're moving to Florida. We're eloping, and you're never going to see her again. Stop it! What causes fights and quarrels among you? He gets to the bottom line. Let's go to he answers the question, don't they come from your desires? That battle, here's the fight. He was talking about a fight when he asked the question. Now he's talking about the real fight. The battle within you. I think it's very important you understand, especially in a culture where we want to blame everybody else for tension in our lives. I think it's important that you understand that it's often you. Noah had a lot of tension. You can imagine, he built a boat 300 miles away from the nearest body of water. Can you imagine all the people who would laugh at him and scold him, but they were all destroyed in the flood. But it was after that, when he had no one else to argue with, that he became the father of all drunks. Why? Because the biggest battle he had was with himself. Which reminds me of a Boudreaux joke. Anybody ready for it? Boudreaux, he was worried about his wife Marie because she couldn't hear. She was losing her hearing. He tried to get her to go to the doctor. Baby, you got to go to the doctor. Something wrong with your hearing. And she said, nothing wrong with my hearing. I'm not going. So she wouldn't go. So he's playing golf with the ENT, and he told the doctor, my wife, she's losing her hearing. And he goes, bring her in. She won't go in. That's what I'm trying to tell you. He said, all right, here's all you got to do. When you get home, you stand behind her 10 feet when she's doing something common, and you just say it in a common voice 10 feet away and just see if she answers. And then if she doesn't, go to 9 feet, and then 8, 7, 6, all the way down. And when she answers, come back and report that number to me. That'll help me a lot. He's like, Doc, you're so smart. I'm going home. Do it right now. So he goes home, and she's cooking, and he stands behind her 10 feet, and he says, hey, Marie, what's for dinner? She didn't answer. He's like, she's deaf, man. And so he gets to 9 feet. Hey, Marie, what's for dinner? Nothing. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Hey, Marie, what's for dinner? Nothing. 3, 2, a foot away. Hey, Marie, what's for dinner? And she turned around. I done told you 9 times we having crawfish pie. Maybe the problem is not what you think it is. Number 2, if you didn't get that, just act like you did, because that'd be really dumb. Number 2, when we think desire is enough, James said it this way. He said, you desire, but do not have. There's probably no one in this room who doesn't desire the Lord some. Even if you're agnostic, there's probably times where you go, I hope there is a God. But let's talk to the believers just in case I'm wrong about some of that. You're here right now. Maybe someone manipulated you to come here and said, if you don't come here, I'm going to cut your throat. That might have happened. But the chances are you came here because you desire God. James is trying to tell the people, hey, you have a desire for the Lord, but that's about it. David, when he prayed for Solomon, he prayed that Solomon, his son, would love God with his whole heart. Well, he had a desire, but it was shallow. So he prayed for wisdom, but that's all he really wanted. Give me wisdom, give me wisdom, give me wisdom. A desire, but not more than that. This guy did have wisdom to a degree, but he also lacked wisdom. This guy decided to have 700 wives. So he's not the smartest guy that ever lived. And 300 porcupines. Okay, concubines. Where did this thinking come from? One time, my son Hunter, and this is a picture of how I would like my relationship to be with God, and it's not, oftentimes. My son Hunter, when he was 4 years old, I took him fishing, and I wanted him to catch a fish. It was his first time. So we go out, and my son Hunter was just happy. So I took him out, and we couldn't catch anything, and I was really discouraged. So he started throwing rocks. Dad, look at this. Skipped it 4 times, 5 times. I said, Hunter, I'm going to keep fishing. So when Hunter wasn't looking, I caught a fish. But I wanted him to catch a fish. So I took it off my hook because he wasn't looking, and I put it on his hook, and then I let it out, and I said, Hunter, I really feel like if you come over now, you'll catch a fish now. And he said, sure, Dad, I'll come over. And he grabbed it. He goes, Dad, this is different. Dad, this is amazing. He's jumping up and down. He knew there was a fish on. He reeled it in. He's dancing. He held up the fish. He's kissing the fish. But the next day, I said, Hunter, what did we do yesterday? He said, we went fishing, Dad. I said, well, did we catch anything? He said, no, you did. Then you took it off the hook and put it on my hook. And I said, Hunter, you acted happy. Why were you acting so happy? You knew that the whole time? He said, I was happy, Dad. I was with you. All the ladies. Ah, you got to smack. Ah. Some of you have been so blessed by God. Raise your hand if you have been. But James is warning with something like this. Now we love the blessing more than the blessor. We love the gifts more than we love the giver of the gifts. You desire, but you do not have. Number 3, when you no longer ask God. And this is what he's saying. Now he's getting into prayer. And I'm going to jump over to chapter 5 a little bit. This is where it gets quite wordy, but this is meaty, and I want you to get it. He said, because you do not ask God. Like your prayer life So if I were to ask, if everyone in the church prayed like you, what type of praying church would we have? I understand this because I have a things to do list. I like get up ready to go every day. And there are times where I don't want to pray that day. I'm too busy. I'm not in the mood. I need to call one of you. And James and the whole Bible is craving, like, before you call a friend, before you call your mama, before you get on email, before you make a move, God is saying, please call me. This is what the 10 Commandments are. The first one, have no other gods in front of me. It's not yelling like, do not have any gods in front of me. It's like, please, I'm a jealous God. This is what it says. Please, I want to be number one in your life. The second one is very much like it. Don't have any idols. The third one is respect my name. The fourth one is to take a day and rest, hang out with me. The Lord loves it when we crave Him. But then some people say, well, Rick, the reason why I don't pray anymore is because God doesn't answer my prayers. Well, let me be clear. Sometimes He answers, but you don't like the answer, so it looks like no answer. Because sometimes God says yes. Raise your hand if you love it when He says yes. But sometimes He says not yet. I hate that one. And then sometimes He says no. That one can be extremely discouraging. Unless you look back over the span of time. There was a time when I gave my heart to the Lord and I was in a college ministry and I met this girl who loved God. I remember praying, Lord, let this be my wife. Thank the Lord He did not say yes to that. Have you ever prayed anything that you are now thankful for that God said no? Adam and Eve, and this is why we stop asking as well. Adam and Eve, they would consult with God in the cool of the day, hanging out with the Lord. And then one day they realized what we want right in the center of our lives, God can't give it to us. In fact, He says no, so we no longer can get it through our request with God. We're going to have to go and get it on our own. And this is the original sin. And it's also the pattern of our fall, our drift even now. To me, prayer is a lost art. I'll have people that come in that consult like our church and you go, man, what's going on? Give us the nuts and bolts. But if we go to prayer and talk about prayer, a lot of times they'll say, hey, I appreciate that, but let's get to something else. Just like some of you are doing now. Because prayer, it's a lost art. We have a lot of things that are slipping that really don't even matter. Like many of you can't spell as good today as you could 5 years ago. Some of you would still write cursive a few years ago, but how many of you do now? How many of you still have a library card? How much channel surfing do you do when you watch TV now? How many of you have more than 10 phone numbers memorized, by heart, memorized? How many of you can still bake from scratch? In Louisiana, I went to a Cajun area where I used to go all the time. Several years ago, I was able to go back and visit there. And they speak Cajun, but it's a lost art. Now when you go there, no one's saying, Tona mikro ça c'est bon mais oui cha. But none of you care. And neither do I. It doesn't matter. But what does matter is when we lose the cry of the Spirit of God in our lives. James, I was studying the tradition. James had a nickname. His nickname, Thomas and others, if you read history, almost all of them referred to him as camel knees. But it wasn't because he had skinny legs and big knees. It's because he literally had calluses on his knees from seeking God. How much time are you in the presence of God? So James chapter 5 says we stop praying when there is suffering. James chapter 5 verse 13. Are any of you suffering hardship? You should pray. Second point in the book of James chapter 5, we stop praying when we are happy. James 5:13. Are any of you happy? You should sing praises to Him. I remember reading the 10 lepers, and Jesus healed the 10 lepers. And when He healed the 10 lepers, they were all so pumped. You can imagine having leprosy ringing a bell every time you got close to people, yelling out, unclean, like run from me. Or they couldn't feel pain. They would lose body parts, like their leg would just fall off. And they would smell. And in 1 second, they're all healed. Well, they went crazy, excited. You can imagine how happy they were. So they scattered about, we're healed, this is amazing. But one found Jesus and said, thank you. And your Lord said, I wonder where the other 9 are. They were healed too. And then he prayed one more time for this person to be whole, like not just healed, but to be complete. My wife, I'm so thankful I married her because my wife, she's very steady. Like she's not a drama queen, she's steady. If you're around her, you'll know right away life is not about her. It's about others. But there was 1 year where my wife was not steady. And it was when her mom died. But I'm moving through life at such a high rate of speed, I didn't even pick up on it. So my wife was just acting funny, just different. And one time I asked her, I said, what's wrong? She said, I miss my mom. Michelle will still tear up sometimes talking about her mom. So I said, what do you miss the most about her? And she said, well, when I'm having a real bad day, I used to call her and ask her to pray about that, and now I can't call her and ask her to pray about that. And I said, any other time? She goes, yes, when I had a really great day. I would call her to tell her, this is what happened. Mom, it was amazing. I can't make those calls anymore. This is why the scripture is asking us in the book of James, call on me when you're suffering, but also call on me when you're happy. And then we stop praying when we're sick. It says, if any of you are sick, you should call the elders of the church to come and pray over you. This word sick, it literally can be translated in the Greek, weak. When you feel weak, have people pray. Like it's okay to call people for prayer. We do this all the time as a church. Sometimes people will pull me to the side and ask me questions like, do you believe in divine miracles, Rick? When you read the word, do you believe in divine miracles? Well, I don't know of any other type of miracle. So I believe, some people believe that when James wrote this letter 2,000 years ago, there's no other miracles since then. And if you want to believe that, you can go in that direction. But let me challenge it in one way. If that's the case, that miracles ceased 2,000 years ago, does that literally mean there hasn't been one miracle in 2,000 years? Not one miracle in 2,000 years? But I have seen people when they're suffering, especially people in pain. If you're in the medical field, a doctor, a nurse, work with people in nursing home, anything in medicine, anything in that field, even holistically, would you stand right now all around this room? Just stand up. Come on. Come on, y'all can do better than that. Thank you. Dr. Ken. Ask any of them how much faith is around pain. Sometimes people can't cover themselves in prayer. They're going to need someone else. And we stop praying when we're in sin. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. This is the verse that I always say. The Bible says you confess your sins to God and He'll forgive you. If you love the forgiveness of God, would you praise His holy name together? Come on, as a church. But here James is not saying that. He's saying if you confess your sins to one another, you'll be healed. We have a lot of people who have been forgiven by God, but they're very sick because they don't have anyone to pray with them about real issues. We stop praying when we're not sincere and honest. James 5:16, the earnest prayer of the righteous is great power. We stop praying when we forget the lost. And I could talk about that a lot, and it's the reason I'm so proud of you guys, always praying for the lost. Most of the people in our church have a name that they're praying for, even now. Always inviting people to the things of God. I love that. But let's go back to signs that you're drifting. when our prayers are blocked from God. Why are prayers blocked from God? James says, when you ask God, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. Raise your hand. In fact, let's not do that. How many of you, let's do it this way. I don't know of anybody in this room that loves to be around somebody who's hypocritical. Like I've never had anybody approach me after, hey, Pastor Rick, where are the hypocrites located here in the church? I just want to mingle with them. Well, if you were to ask me that, I would say, wow, they're everywhere. Even the one answering the question to you right now. Because we've all asked with wrong motives. So James is saying this, look, get your motive right. And he said, don't say, in James 4, don't say you're going to run to that city and make money there and then go over here and make money there. I'm going to go to this school and I'm going to do this and I'm going to run all around and I got this thing figured out. But it says, first say, Lord, if it's your will, this is what we'll do. I think that it's close relationships that keep our motives pure. Studying about the life of John Wesley, he would have these friends, these 10 guys who would sit around him, and he would ask them the tough questions, and they were all growing rapidly. He would say things like, have any of you lied this week to anybody? Let's go around the room. He would say, have any of you said words to one another or to anyone that we need to settle that right now? Have any of you looked at anything inappropriately this week that we need to talk about? Have any of you lost your integrity this week with finances or in any way this week? The last question every time was, have any of you just lied to me? And they would take out their heart and pray over these things. I think it's very important you understand that you can be in a church, like James was writing these churches. They were in the church, but they were not in it with one another. And their motives have shifted. Have you ever had anyone that you saw some major problem in their lives, but you couldn't even bring it up? Like they didn't even allow you to bring it up. Like you had to read books on skill with people in the right moment to bring it up. This is what James is saying. When you live on an island like that, you're going to have issues and no one's going to be able to change you. Because you're on an island and you say no. Like when you get home, if you look in the mirror and you see something hanging out of your nose, we saw it too. But if you won't let us tell you, then you're just going to have to figure it out when you get home. So how do you settle this problem? What solution does God give us to get back on track? James chapter 4, here's the solution. We're just going to summarize this whole talk. Now this is a pastor, but look what he's saying. You adulterous people. Don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Now go to the last verse that we have, the next verse. But he gives us more grace. Now raise your hand if you need more grace in your life. Yes, you do. But he gives us more grace, and that is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. I always say when you're prideful, you have a need to be noticed, but when you're humble, you notice needs. Submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. I just want to zero in on this part. It's all about the grace. Come near to God, and he will come nearer to you. Now click that off, and let me just give you a picture. James. Who was he talking about? His brother. For 3 years, he shared a room with the Messiah. He thought he was crazy. But it all changed when he met the grace. Like when Jesus walked through a wall to sit down and talk with James, he saw the grace. James would have never gotten right with God without the grace. And neither will you. So at some point it was like, that's my brother, that's my brother, that's my brother. That's not my brother. That's the Messiah. That is God. He's going to hold all these things against me. But no, he doesn't. And I'm going to tell you, I have never seen anybody get out of a rut of the drift without knowing there's a lot of grace. It goes so far as to say that his grace is sufficient for you. Let's bow our heads, no one looking around.